The Billionaire's Collapse. When a fortune can't buy what matters most, a stranger's kindness rewrites everything. The crystal chandeliers of Aurelio cast fractured light across marble floors slick with old money and new ambition. Victoria Hale didn't notice. She never did. Her heels clicked a rhythm of absolute certainty as she swept through the restaurant's entrance, one hand pressed to her phone, the other guiding her 7-year-old son, Noah, through a world that parted for her like water. She was answering her fourth crisis of the evening when Noah stopped walking. Victoria's hand closed on empty air. She turned, irritation flashing across features that had graced Forbes covers and boardroom nightmares alike. "Noah, we don't have time." But her son wasn't listening. His small face had gone soft with something Victoria didn't recognize, his eyes fixed on a corner table where a man in a faded jacket carefully twirled pasta around a fork, guiding it toward a little girl whose laughter rang out like bells no amount of money could commission. The girl clapped. The man smiled. It was such a small moment, so ordinary it should have been invisible. Noah's whisper cut through every calculation in Victoria's mind. "Mama, he's feeding her." Before Victoria could respond, before she could redirect or dismiss or control, Noah walked toward that table with the kind of certainty she usually commanded in mergers worth billions. And in that moment, two worlds that were never meant to collide lurched into devastating proximity. This is the story of what happens when power discovers it's been starving. When a woman who built an empire realizes she forgot to build a home. And when a stranger with scarred hands and nothing to prove saves more than just a life. If you're watching from New York, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, or anywhere dreams cost more than they should, drop your city in the comments. Hit that like button. Because this story is about to show you that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, controlled, or delegated. Let me take you through what happened when Victoria Hale's perfect world shattered, and a man named Caleb Moore caught the pieces. The reservation had been made 6 weeks in advance. Table 12, northwest corner, maximum visibility with strategic discretion. Victoria Hale didn't eat at Aurelio for the food, though the food was exceptional. She ate there because power recognized power, and Aurelio was where empires were built over wine that cost more than most people's mortgages. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Dinner with Noah. 30 minutes of maternal visibility before the quarterly board meeting that would determine whether she retained control of Hale Industries or watched vultures pick apart everything she'd built. Simple had lasted exactly 40 seconds. "Mama, look!" Victoria glanced up from her phone where Marcus Chen, her CFO and the only board member she still trusted, was texting increasingly urgent warnings about Gerald Whitmore's latest maneuver. Her son stood frozen 3 steps from their table, staring at something across the restaurant with an expression she'd never seen on his face. Wonder. Pure, unguarded wonder. She followed his gaze to a corner table she would have walked past without a second thought. A man, early 30s, worn jacket that had seen better years, face marked with the kind of tired that came from fighting battles no one applauded, sat across from a girl who couldn't have been more than 5. The girl's hair was pulled into uneven pigtails, her dress clean but clearly second-hand. Between them sat 2 plates of pasta and a conversation composed entirely of laughter and pasta sauce. The man was cutting the girl's spaghetti into careful pieces, testing each one's temperature against his wrist before offering it to her on a fork. The girl kicked her feet under the table, telling some elaborate story with wild hand gestures that threatened water glasses. The man listened like she was reporting classified intelligence. "Emma, inside voice," he murmured, but his eyes were smiling. "But Papa, the dragon was this big." The girl's arms spread wide, knocking over the pepper shaker. The man caught it without breaking attention. Even dragons respect restaurant acoustics. The girl dissolved into giggles. Victoria felt Noah's hand slip from hers. "Noah." But her son was already moving, drawn toward that table with magnetic inevitability. Victoria's heels clicked sharp warnings against marble as she followed, one hand already reaching to redirect, to control, to restore proper boundaries between their world and whatever this was. Noah stopped at the edge of their table. The man looked up, surprise flickering across features that were handsome in an understated way, the kind of face that carried stories in the lines around eyes that had seen too much and chosen kindness anyway. "Hi," Noah whispered. The little girl beamed. Hi, I'm Emma. Do you like pasta? Noah! Victoria's voice carried boardroom authority wrapped in maternal civility. We need to sit down. But Noah wasn't listening. He was staring at Emma's plate, at the man's careful attention, at the easy warmth that radiated from their corner like heat from a fire Victoria had forgotten existed. Can I sit with you? Noah's voice was so small, so naked with longing that Victoria felt something crack in her chest. The man's eyes shifted to Victoria, assessing, understanding, carefully neutral. I think your mom might have other plans, buddy. I don't mind, Emma announced with the confident authority of childhood. You can sit here. She patted the seat beside her. Noah looked up at Victoria with eyes that held a question she didn't know how to answer. Around them, the restaurant's ambient noise seemed to pause. She could feel the weight of watching eyes. Aurelio's clientele recognizing her, cataloging this moment, this deviation from expected behavior. Victoria Hale didn't sit at tables with strangers in worn jackets. Victoria Hale didn't let her son interrupt other people's dinners. Victoria Hale certainly didn't allow 7-year-olds to dictate her schedule 45 minutes before a meeting that would determine her company's future. Please, Mama. That word. Please. When had Noah last asked her for anything that wasn't permission to be somewhere else, with someone else, doing something that didn't require her participation? The man was already standing, preparing to diffuse the situation with practiced grace. It's okay. We don't want to intrude on your evening. You're not intruding. The words left Victoria's mouth before her mind approved them. If Noah would like to join you for a moment, I suppose we have time. The man blinked. Emma clapped. Noah's face lit up with something Victoria couldn't name. And just like that, Victoria Hale found herself sitting at a corner table with a stranger and his daughter, her perfect evening dissolving into something she couldn't control. The man extended his hand across the table, calloused, scarred across the knuckles. Steady. Caleb Moore. Victoria's handshake was brief, professional. Victoria Hale. If the name registered, he didn't show it. Emma already introduced herself. She's subtle that way. Emma waved enthusiastically at Noah, who had claimed the seat beside her with the kind of joy Victoria usually only saw when he was with his nanny. Noah doesn't usually approach strangers, Victoria heard herself say. Kids have good instincts about people. Caleb returned to cutting Emma's pasta with the same careful attention he'd shown before the interruption. They see what matters. There was no judgment in his voice, but Victoria felt it anyway. She glanced at Noah, who was watching Caleb's hands with absolute focus. Papa cuts it really small, Emma explained to Noah with the authority of an expert, so it doesn't burn my mouth. My mom doesn't cut my food, Noah said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Victoria's fingers tightened around her phone. Noah has been feeding himself since he was 5. That's impressive. Caleb didn't look up from Emma's plate. Emma's working on it. We're not quite there yet. I can do it, Emma protested, but Papa's better at the twirly thing. Noah leaned forward, fascinated. The twirly thing? Caleb demonstrated, spinning pasta around a fork with the kind of casual expertise that spoke of thousands of dinners just like this one. It's all in the wrist. Want to try? Before Victoria could intervene, Noah nodded. Caleb pushed his own untouched plate toward Noah. Give it a shot. Noah's first attempt sent spaghetti sliding off the fork. His second wasn't much better. Victoria watched her son's face, waiting for frustration, for the shutdown that came whenever something proved difficult. Instead, Caleb's hand covered Noah's smaller one, guiding the motion. Easy. Let the fork do the work. You're just steering. On the third try, Noah lifted a perfect spiral of pasta, his face bright with achievement. Excellent. Caleb's approval was simple, direct, earned. Now test the temperature. Noah looked confused. Like this. Caleb took the fork, touched the pasta carefully to his wrist, then nodded. Safe. Your turn. Noah mimicked the gesture with such careful precision that Victoria felt something tighten in her throat. Can you cut mine too? The question left Noah's mouth before Victoria could process what he was asking. Every eye in their section of the restaurant turned toward their table. Victoria could feel the judgment, the whispers starting to ripple outward. Victoria Hale's son asking a stranger to cut his food. Victoria Hale sitting at a table with someone wearing a jacket that cost less than her appetizer. Caleb's eyes found hers, asking permission without words. Victoria should have said no, should have stood, thanked him for his time, guided Noah back to their proper table where proper distance could be restored. Should have done what Victoria Hale always did, controlled the narrative before it controlled her. Instead, she heard herself say, "If you don't mind." Caleb pulled Noah's untouched plate toward him and began cutting with the same unhurried attention he'd shown Emma. Victoria watched his hands, scarred, steady, completely focused on a task worth doing well. When had she last cut Noah's food? When had she last fed him at all, rather than ensuring staff had prepared appropriate portions and monitored his nutrition with dietary precision? "So, Emma," Noah ventured shyly, "what grade are you in?" "Kindergarten, but I'm going to be in first grade soon." Emma bounced in her seat. "Papa says I'm very mature." "Very mature people use inside voices," Caleb murmured, still focused on Noah's plate. Emma lowered her voice to a stage whisper that probably carried farther than her regular volume. "What about you?" "Second grade. I go to Ashworth Academy." "Is that far away?" "Kind of. I have a driver." Emma's eyes went wide. "Like a race car driver?" "No, like someone who drives me to school." Emma processed this with the seriousness of a philosopher encountering a new paradox. "Why doesn't your mama drive you?" Noah's gaze flickered to Victoria. "She's busy. She runs a big company." "Oh." Emma considered this. "Papa used to be busy too. Before." "Before what?" Caleb set Noah's plate back in front of him, perfectly portioned, properly cooled. "Before I decided busy wasn't the same as present." The words landed with surgical precision. Victoria felt them settle somewhere behind her ribs, in a place she'd long since learned to ignore. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. "Board meeting moved up. Whitmore's making his move early. Need you here in 20. 20 minutes to get across town. 20 minutes to prepare for the fight that would determine whether she kept her company or lost everything her father had built, everything she'd sacrificed to preserve." Victoria stood, smoothing her dress with practiced efficiency. "Noah, we need to go." Noah looked up from his pasta, disappointment washing across his face. "But I just started eating." "You can finish in the car." She was already calculating routes, rehearsing arguments, fortifying the walls that kept chaos at bay. "Please, Mama, can't we stay a little longer?" Every second counted. Every moment of delay gave Whitmore more time to consolidate board votes, to paint her as distracted, unfocused, unfit for leadership. But Noah was looking at her with eyes that held something she couldn't quite name, something that felt dangerously close to hope. 10 minutes, she heard herself say. No more. Noah's smile could have powered the entire restaurant. Victoria sat back down, tension coiling through her shoulders as she fired off a response to Marcus. "On my way. Stall him!" Across the table, Caleb had returned to his own dinner, giving Noah and Emma space to chat with the easy enthusiasm of children who hadn't yet learned that different worlds weren't supposed to touch. "Your son has good manners," Caleb said quietly. "He was raised properly." "There's a difference between properly and well." Victoria's eyes snapped to his face. "Excuse me?" Caleb met her gaze with the kind of steady calm that didn't flinch. "No offense intended. Just an observation. You know nothing about how I raise my son." "You're right. I don't." He took a bite of pasta that had probably gone cold while he'd fed Emma and helped Noah. "I just know what I see." "And what do you see?" "A kid who's hungry for something that isn't on the menu." The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria's fingers tightened around her phone hard enough that the case creaked. "That's presumptuous." "Maybe. But he asked me to cut his food." Caleb's voice stayed level, without judgment or accusation. "When's the last time someone did that for him?" "He's 7 years old. He's perfectly capable." "I'm not questioning his capability. I'm questioning whether being capable means he should have to be." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, to explain all the ways this stranger was wrong about her son, about her choices, about the impossible calculations required to build an empire while raising a child alone. Her phone exploded with notifications. The board meeting wasn't in 20 minutes. It was starting now. Whitmore had accelerated everything, probably hoping she'd be late, flustered, unprepared. I have to go. Victoria stood again, this time with finality. Noah? Can I come back? Noah's question stopped her. Can I see Emma again? Emma grabbed Noah's hand. Yes, we could have a play date. Victoria looked at Caleb, expecting him to deflect, to make polite excuses that preserved proper boundaries. Instead, he pulled a worn business card from his wallet and offered it to her. If you're serious, my number's on there. The card was simple, cream-colored, professionally printed. Caleb Moore. Private consultant. No company name. No impressive titles. Just a phone number and an email address. Victoria took the card because refusing would have made a scene, would have disappointed Noah, would have revealed more than she wanted this stranger to see. Thank you for letting Noah join you. Anytime. Caleb's smile was small, genuine. It's nice to share dinner with someone who appreciates the twirly thing. Noah giggled. The sound was so unexpected, so purely joyful, that Victoria actually paused. When had she last made her son laugh? Come on, sweetheart. She rested her hand on Noah's shoulder, feeling how small he was, how fragile under expensive clothes and excellent posture. We really do have to go. Noah hugged Emma goodbye with the fierce enthusiasm of children who understood that good things were temporary. Emma hugged back just as hard. As Victoria guided her son toward the exit, she glanced back once. Caleb had returned to his dinner, to his daughter, to their small corner of warmth in a restaurant designed to showcase wealth. He didn't watch her leave, didn't seem to care that Victoria Hale, Billionaire'S CEO, had just shared his table. The indifference should have been refreshing. Instead, it felt like the loneliest thing in the world. The car ride to Hale Industries took 14 minutes. Noah spent 13 of them staring out the window, twirling an invisible fork in his hands, practicing the motion Caleb had taught him. Victoria spent those same minutes reviewing Marcus's briefing notes, preparing arguments, building the fortress of logic that would let her walk into that boardroom and demolish Gerald Whitmore's coup before it could take root. Mama? Why don't you ever cut my food? Victoria's fingers stilled on her tablet. Outside, the city blurred past, lights and lives and stories she would never know. Because you're capable of doing it yourself. But Papa cuts Emma's food, and she's younger than me. Every family does things differently, Noah. But Noah's voice was so small. It looked nice. The way he did it, like he was taking care of her. I take care of you. I know. Noah pressed his forehead against the window. It's just different. Victoria wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to defend all the ways she'd sacrificed, all the hours she'd worked to ensure Noah had everything money could buy, the best schools, the finest clothes, opportunities that most children couldn't imagine. But the car was already pulling up to Hale Industries, and Marcus was texting crisis updates, and there wasn't time for conversations that led to places she couldn't control. I'll be home late tonight, she said instead. Miss Patterson will put you to bed. Noah nodded without looking at her. Okay. Victoria kissed the top of his head, brief, efficient, maternal. Be good. Mama? She was already halfway out of the car. Yes? Can we really see Emma again? And Mr. Moore? Victoria looked at her son's hopeful face and felt something crack wider in her chest, something that had started fracturing the moment Noah asked a stranger to cut his pasta. We'll see. It was the answer she always gave when she meant no but didn't want to deal with disappointment. Noah's face shuddered closed. He nodded, retreating into the careful politeness that made him so easy to manage, so simple to delegate. Victoria told herself it was for the best. She told herself this as she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. She told herself this as she walked into the boardroom where 12 pairs of eyes tracked her entrance with predatory interest. She told herself this as Gerald Whitmore smiled his shark smile and began his presentation about why Victoria Hale was no longer fit to lead the company bearing her name. She almost believed it, until her vision started to blur at the edges and her heart began beating in patterns that didn't make sense, and the walls of the boardroom started closing in with the weight of every sacrifice she'd made, Every moment she'd chosen empire over presence. Every night she'd kissed Noah's forehead and left him with staff because the company couldn't run itself. The last thing Victoria remembered before the darkness took her was Gerald Whitmore's voice, smooth and satisfied. As you can see, Ms. Hale's recent behavior demonstrates a concerning lack of focus. Perhaps it's time we considered. Then the floor rushed up to meet her, and the world went black. Woket. Victoria woke to fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of corporate medical facilities. Her head throbbed. Her mouth tasted like metal and regret. Easy. A hand pressed gently against her shoulder, keeping her from sitting up too fast. You're okay. Just breathe. The voice was familiar, calm, steady in a way that didn't match the chaos of the board meeting she vaguely remembered. Victoria's vision cleared enough to recognize the man sitting beside her medical cot. Caleb Moore. What? Her voice came out hoarse. What are you doing here? Making sure you don't try to stand up before your blood pressure stabilizes. He released her shoulder but stayed close, monitoring with the kind of attention that spoke of training she didn't understand. How do you feel? Confused. Victoria tried to sit up. The room tilted. Caleb's hand returned to her shoulder, not forceful, just present. Where's Noah? With Emma and your building's security. They're fine. Playing some game involving imaginary dragons. Victoria's mind struggled to assemble coherent timeline. The board meeting is on hold. Caleb's voice stayed level. You collapsed. Your CFO called emergency services, but you were already coming around by the time they arrived. I don't understand. How did you... I was in the building. Different meeting. Wrong place, right time. His eyes held hers with uncomfortable directness. When's the last time you ate something? This morning, I think. What did you eat? Coffee. Maybe a protein bar? That's not food. That's fuel. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something in his voice sharpened. When's the last time you slept? Really slept? More than 4 hours? Victoria's silence answered for her. Caleb stood, moving to the small counter where someone had left a bottle of water and what looked like hospital crackers. He brought them back to her, opening the water with efficient movements. Drink. Small sips. I don't take orders from strangers who cut your son's pasta? Caleb's half-smile was tired around the edges. Consider it a suggestion from someone who's seen stress collapse before. Drink. Victoria drank because arguing required energy she didn't have. The water was cold, clean, necessary. Better, Caleb said after she'd finished half the bottle. Now the crackers. I'm not hungry. Your body disagrees. Eat. This time Victoria didn't argue. The crackers tasted like cardboard and something close to survival. Through the medical room's glass wall, she could see Marcus pacing, phone pressed to his ear. Beyond him, the hallway was full of executives pretending not to hover while absolutely hovering. The meeting, Victoria said again. You need to sit here and recover. Caleb's voice carried the kind of authority that didn't require volume. Whatever's happening in that boardroom can wait 30 minutes. You don't understand. There's a coup. Whitmore's trying to remove me. Then he's an idiot. Caleb settled back into the chair beside her cot. But he's not wrong about one thing. Victoria's spine stiffened. What? You can't run an empire if you're running on empty. He met her glare without flinching. When's the last time you took a full breath? When's the last time you sat down for a meal that lasted longer than 10 minutes? When's the last time you did anything that wasn't about survival? You don't know anything about my life. I know you collapsed in a boardroom at 45 minutes past 7 on a Tuesday. Caleb's voice stayed steady. I know your son asked a stranger to cut his food because he's hungry for attention you're too exhausted to give. I know you're fighting so hard to keep everything together that you're forgetting what you're fighting for. The words landed like bullets, precise, devastating, impossible to deflect. How dare you? I dare because nobody else will. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes holding hers with uncomfortable compassion. I dare because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, same mistake. And I learned the hard way that being strong isn't the same as being whole. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the ways he was wrong, all the reasons her situation was different, all the impossible choices that came with the territory she'd inherited. But the fluorescent lights were too bright, and her head hurt. And somewhere beyond this medical room, her son was playing with a little girl whose father had time to cut her pasta into perfect pieces. "I don't have a choice," she whispered. "Everyone has a choice." Caleb's voice gentled. "Question is whether you're brave enough to make it." Before Victoria could respond, Marcus burst through the door, concern and calculation warring across his features. "Thank God you're okay." He glanced at Caleb with the kind of dismissal reserved for people who didn't matter in important spaces. "We need to talk. Whitmore's circling, and the board wants answers about your episode." "Give us a minute," Victoria said. Marcus blinked. "Victoria, this can't wait." "I said give us a minute." Her CFO's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then he nodded and retreated back through the glass door, but he didn't go far. Victoria turned back to Caleb. "Who are you, really?" "Someone who's made different choices." He stood, checking his watch with the ease of a man whose schedule was his own. "I should get Emma home. School night." "You were in this building for a meeting." "Consulting work, nothing important." "What kind of consulting?" Caleb's smile was small, tired. "The kind that pays enough to keep the lights on and buy good pasta." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Your son's a good kid, smart, kind, hungry for connection." He looked back at her. "Don't let your empire eat what matters most." "You don't understand what I'm up against." "You're right. I don't." Caleb's hand rested on the door handle. "But I understand what you stand to lose, and I promise you, no boardroom victory is worth that price." He left before Victoria could respond. Through the glass, she watched him collect Emma and Noah from where they'd been playing under security's watchful eye. Watched Emma hug Noah goodbye with fierce affection. Watched Noah cling for just a moment longer than necessary. Watched Caleb ruffle her son's hair with casual affection, the kind of touch that said you matter without requiring words. Then they were gone, disappearing into the elevator with the ease of people whose worth wasn't measured in quarterly reports. Marcus appeared again immediately. "We have maybe 15 minutes before Whitmore consolidates enough votes. You need to get back in there." Victoria stood. The room tilted, then steadied. "What's his play? Claiming you're unstable? Using tonight's collapse as evidence that you can't handle the pressure. He's got Thompson and Richards on his side, probably Martinez, too. That's 4 votes. He needs 6 for majority. He's working on it." Marcus handed her a folder. "I've got counterarguments ready, but Victoria, you need to be sharp. One more sign of weakness, and he wins." Victoria took the folder. Inside were speeches, statistics, rebuttals, everything she needed to walk back into that boardroom and demolish Whitmore's coup with surgical precision. Everything except the answer to the question Caleb had left hanging in the air. "What are you fighting for?" "Marcus." "Yeah?" "If I asked you to cut Noah's pasta, would you do it?" Her CFO stared at her like she'd started speaking Mandarin. "What?" "Never mind." Victoria smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in the medical room's small mirror. The woman staring back looked hollow around the eyes, brittle at the edges. "Let's go destroy Whitmore." "That's the Victoria I know." But as they walked back toward the boardroom, Victoria's hand slipped into her pocket and found Caleb Moore's business card. Simple, unpretentious, offering connection without demanding anything in return. Private consultant. She wondered what that really meant. She wondered why a man who could command authority in a crisis situation was wearing a jacket that had seen better years. She wondered what choices he'd made, what prices he'd paid, what he'd lost before he'd learned that being strong wasn't the same as being whole. Most of all, she wondered whether her son would remember this night. Not the boardroom drama, not the medical emergency, not the corporate warfare that consumed her life, but the moment a stranger had taken time to teach him how to twirl pasta properly. The moment someone had shown him what it looked like when care wasn't delegated but given freely, directly, with the kind of presence that no amount of money could purchase. Victoria Hale walked back into the boardroom with her armor in place and her weapons sharp. But somewhere under the titanium shell she'd built to survive in a world that devoured weakness, something had begun to crack. And she wasn't sure whether that terrified her or offered the first real hope she'd felt in years. The boardroom felt different when Victoria walked back in. The same leather chairs, the same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that never stopped consuming itself. The same faces arranged around polished mahogany, worth more than most people earned in a year. But something fundamental had shifted in the 23 minutes she'd been gone. Gerald Whitmore sat at the far end of the table, her father's old seat, the one she'd never claimed because symbolism mattered less than strategy. He'd spread his materials across the surface with the confidence of a man who'd already won. Thompson and Richards flanked him like bookends of betrayal. Martinez sat 2 chairs down, eyes carefully neutral in a way that confirmed Marcus's intelligence. 4 votes. Maybe 5 if Jenkins was wobbling. Victoria needed 7 to maintain control. Gentlemen? She didn't sit. Standing gave her height advantage, made them look up, shifted the power dynamic in ways that mattered. I apologize for the interruption. No need to apologize for a medical emergency. Whitmore's voice dripped synthetic concern. Though it does raise questions about your capacity to handle the pressures of leadership. I'm sure it does. Victoria set Marcus's folder on the table but didn't open it. Just as I'm sure you've spent the last 20 minutes explaining to our board members why a temporary episode of low blood pressure somehow disqualifies me from running the company my father built. Your father built this company on strength. Whitmore leaned back, fingers steepled. On unwavering focus and uncompromising dedication. He never would have collapsed in the middle of a critical meeting. My father died at 58 from a stress-induced heart attack in this very room. Victoria's voice could have cut glass. So perhaps we should reconsider what strength actually looks like. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Thompson cleared his throat. Victoria, no one's questioning your dedication. But tonight's incident, combined with recent distractions, it's natural for the board to have concerns. Distractions. Victoria turned to face him directly. You mean my son? I mean the rumors. Thompson had the grace to look uncomfortable. About you having dinner with some random man and his child. About your son becoming attached to strangers. About priorities that seem to be shifting away from Hale Industries. Ice flooded Victoria's veins. Excuse me? Whitmore smiled. Social media is a fascinating thing, especially when a billionaire CEO sits down at a table with a working-class nobody and lets her son bond with his daughter like their family. He slid his phone across the table. The image on the screen punched the air from Victoria's lungs. Someone had photographed their table at Aurelio. Noah sitting beside Emma, Caleb's hand guiding her son's fork, Victoria watching with an expression that looked almost soft. The caption read, Victoria Hale slumming it? Billionaire CEO spotted with mystery man and kids at fancy restaurant. New boyfriend or PR stunt? Victoria Hale, nash power couple, nash billionaire. Life. The post had 17,000 likes. The comments section was a war zone of speculation, judgment, and theories ranging from reasonable to completely insane. This was posted 40 minutes ago, Whitmore said. It's already been picked up by 3 gossip sites and Bloomberg is asking for comment. So you'll forgive the board for wondering whether your judgment is perhaps becoming compromised. Victoria's hands didn't shake as she picked up Whitmore's phone. Didn't shake as she studied the image, seeing herself through strangers' eyes, a woman who'd let her guard down for 12 minutes and was now paying the price. Who is he? Richards demanded. This Caleb Moore? Someone who helped my son learn to eat pasta properly. Victoria set the phone down with deliberate care. How that translates to compromised judgment, I'm fascinated to hear. It translates to distraction. Whitmore reclaimed his phone. To a CEO who's starting to prioritize personal matters over corporate responsibility, who's making impulsive decisions, who's showing weakness at the exact moment this company needs strength. Marcus started to respond, but Victoria raised one hand. She'd fought her way through Harvard Business School as the only woman in her program. She'd taken over Hale Industries at 26 when her father's heart gave out between the appetizer and entree of a business dinner he should have skipped. She'd spent 12 years building her father's legacy into something he'd never imagined while raising a son alone, because Noah's father had decided fatherhood was less interesting than a tech startup in Singapore. She hadn't survived all of that by letting men like Gerald Whitmore weaponize her humanity against her. Let me tell you about weakness, Victoria said quietly. The room went still. Weakness is being so afraid of appearing human that you collapse from exhaustion in front of your entire board. Weakness is being so committed to an image of invulnerability that you forget how to connect with your own son. Weakness is letting fear of judgment dictate every choice you make until you're nothing but armor with no one inside. She moved around the table slowly, holding each board member's gaze. I had dinner with a man and his daughter because my son asked me to. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, Noah showed interest in something that wasn't orchestrated or scheduled or approved by committee. Because he saw a father taking care of his child and recognized something he was missing. Victoria stopped at Whitmore's shoulder. That's not distraction. That's paying attention to what actually matters. And if this board wants to remove me because I spent 12 minutes being a mother instead of a machine, then perhaps I'm leading the wrong company. Thompson shifted uncomfortably. Martinez's careful neutrality had developed cracks. Even Richards looked uncertain. Beautiful speech, Whitmore said. But speeches don't run companies. Focus does. Dedication does. And right now the optics are clear. Victoria Hale is losing control. The optics are that I'm human. Victoria leaned against the table, deliberate invasion of Whitmore's space. Which seems to terrify you. I wonder why. I'm not the one being discussed on social media. No, you're just the one trying to stage a coup while I was unconscious. Victoria straightened. Marcus, would you mind sharing with the board what you found in Whitmore's office this afternoon? Her CFO's smile could have frozen nitrogen. He opened his own folder, distributing copies around the table with the efficiency of a man who'd been waiting for this exact moment. At approximately 3:15 today, I discovered communications between Gerald Whitmore and Horizon Capital regarding a potential buyout of Hale Industries. Communications that began 6 weeks ago. Communications that include detailed financial projections assuming Whitmore as CEO and a board restructure that would remove or reduce positions for everyone currently in this room, except Thompson and Richards. The papers landed in front of each board member like grenades. Thompson's face went pale. Gerald, what is this? Insurance. Whitmore didn't even try to deny it. Against exactly this kind of emotional instability, this company needs leadership that puts profit over personal drama. This company needs leadership that isn't actively trying to sell it to vulture capitalists. Marcus tapped the documents. Page 4 outlines Horizon's restructure plans. 1,200 jobs eliminated in the first quarter. R&D budget cut by 40%. 3 divisions sold off for parts. Martinez was reading now, anger building in his expression. You were going to gut us. I was going to save us from management that's more interested in playing house with random men than protecting shareholder value. Victoria felt the rage building, white-hot and righteous. But rage was what Whitmore wanted. Rage made her look unstable, emotional, exactly as weak as he'd claimed. Instead, she smiled. This meeting is over. Whitmore, you're terminated effective immediately. Thompson, Richards, you have 24 hours to decide whether you'd like to join him or explain to the SEC why you were aware of attempted corporate sabotage and failed to report it. Everyone else, I'll expect your written commitment to this company by 9 a.m. tomorrow. You can't fire me. Whitmore stood, papers scattering. I have a contract. You have a morality clause that prohibits actions harmful to company interests. Attempting to orchestrate a hostile takeover while serving on the board seems to qualify. Marcus, please have security escort Mr. Whitmore from the building. This isn't over, Whitmore snarled. That picture, that man, whatever's happening in your personal life, it's going to destroy you. You can't be Victoria Hale and play happy family with some nobody. Then I guess we'll find out what Victoria Hale is actually capable of. She held his stare until security arrived. Goodbye, Gerald. They removed him with the professional efficiency of men trained to handle exactly this situation. Thompson and Richards left shortly after, silent, pale, calculating their next moves. The remaining board members filed out with murmured assurances of support that would need to be verified in writing. Finally, Victoria was alone with Marcus. That was either brilliant or suicidal, her CFO said, possibly both. It was necessary. Victoria sank into the nearest chair, adrenaline draining away to leave exhaustion in its wake. The picture? Damage control is already working on it. We'll frame it as you mentoring a single father, corporate responsibility, humanizing the brand. Don't! Victoria's voice came out harder than intended. Don't turn it into a PR strategy. Marcus blinked. Victoria, we have to control the narrative. The narrative is that I had dinner with my son and he made a friend. That's it. No spin, no strategy, no corporate messaging. She met his confused stare. Tell damage control to say no comment and let it die naturally. That's not how you've ever handled media before. I know. Marcus studied her with the particular intensity of someone trying to solve an equation that had suddenly stopped making sense. Who is he? This Caleb Moore? Someone who taught my son to twirl pasta. Victoria pulled out her phone, found the photo of Noah's face bright with achievement as he lifted that perfect spiral. She'd taken it without thinking, capturing a moment of pure joy she couldn't remember seeing in months. Someone who showed me what I've been missing. Which is? Everything that matters. Her CFO was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. You know, if you pursue this, whatever this is, Whitmore was right. The media will eviscerate you. Let them. Victoria stood, gathering her things with automatic efficiency. I've spent 12 years proving I could run this company. Maybe it's time I prove I can live a life too. And if you can't do both? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications she wasn't ready to examine. Then I'll figure it out. Victoria headed for the door. Same way I figured out everything else. Marcus called after her. Victoria? For what it's worth, I think your father would have been proud of how you handled tonight. She paused at the threshold. My father died because he chose this company over everything else. I'm not sure his pride is the metric I want to chase anymore. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt longer than usual. Victoria's reflection stared back from polished steel, hair slightly mussed, makeup no longer perfect, eyes that looked almost human in their exhaustion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Noah's nanny. He's asking about Emma again. Should I tell him it was just a one-time thing? Victoria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. The answer that protected her image and kept complications at bay was absolutely yes. Instead, she found Caleb's business card in her pocket and typed a different message. Is the offer still open for that playdate? She sent it before her brain could override her instincts. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Victoria was starting to feel foolish when her phone finally buzzed. Depends. Are you asking as a CEO looking for good optics or as a mom whose son made a friend? Victoria smiled despite everything. The second one? Then, yes, Emma hasn't stopped talking about Noah. When works for you? Saturday afternoon, if that's not too soon? Perfect. There's a park near my place. Riverside. Emma loves the swings. 2 p.m. We'll be there. Victoria set her phone down, staring at the exchange like it might disappear if she looked away. When was the last time she'd made plans that weren't scheduled by assistants or negotiated through layers of staff? When was the last time she'd done something simply because it felt right instead of because it advanced a strategic objective? The parking garage was empty except for her car and driver. Robert had been with her for 8 years, long enough to read her moods in the set of her shoulders. Home, Ms. Hale? Actually, Victoria paused. Do you know where Riverside Park is? Robert's eyebrows rose fractionally. Yes, ma'am. Drive past it on the way home. I want to see it. If her driver thought the request strange, he didn't show it. They pulled out of the garage into nighttime traffic, the city spreading around them in layers of light and shadow. Victoria watched it pass, thinking about Caleb's worn jacket and careful hands, about the way he'd monitored her recovery with professional competence she didn't understand, about how he'd spoken to her with the kind of directness that most people wrapped in 6 layers of deference. When's the last time you did anything that wasn't about survival? The question haunted her all the way across town. Riverside Park appeared on their right, smaller than she'd expected, sandwiched between apartment buildings that had seen better decades. The playground equipment looked old, but well-maintained. Street lights illuminated empty swings moving in the evening breeze like ghosts of children who'd play there tomorrow. This is it? Victoria asked. Yes, ma'am. Shall I stop? No, keep going. But she turned to watch the park disappear behind them, imagining Noah on those swings, laughing with Emma while she and Caleb sat on benches and talked about things that weren't board meetings or hostile takeovers or the impossible weight of legacies she hadn't asked to carry. The thought terrified her. The thought filled her with something that felt dangerously close to hope. When they arrived home, the penthouse that had been in her family for 3 generations, all glass and steel and views that cost more per square foot than most people's entire homes. Noah was already in bed. Victoria found him curled under covers decorated with constellations he'd never seen because the city's light pollution made stars invisible. "Hey, sweetheart." She sat on the edge of his bed, brushing hair from his forehead with fingers that suddenly remembered how. Noah's eyes opened, sleepy, uncertain. "Mama, you're home early. It's almost 10. That's early for you." The observation landed like a knife between ribs. "I suppose it is." "Did you win your meeting?" "Sort of." Victoria kept stroking his hair, the repetitive motion soothing something in her own chest. "I fired someone who was trying to hurt our company." "Good," Noah yawned. "Ms. Patterson said I probably won't see Emma again." Miss Patterson was wrong. Victoria pulled out her phone, showing Noah the text exchange. "We're going to the park on Saturday. You and Emma can play while Mr. Moore and I talk." Noah sat up so fast he nearly knocked his head into Victoria's chin. "Really? You promise?" "I promise." Her son threw his arms around her neck with the kind of desperate affection that suggested he'd been waiting years for permission to need her. Victoria held him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and the particular sweetness of childhood that was already starting to fade. "Mama?" "I like Mr. Moore. He's nice. He seems to be. Do you think—" Noah pulled back, searching her face with eyes that were far too old for 7. "Do you think he could teach me other stuff? Like how to tie good knots or how to fix things?" "Why would you want to learn those things?" "Because Mr. Moore, he looks like he knows how to do everything, not because people do it for him. Because he learned." Noah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know how to do anything real." Victoria felt something crack wider in her chest, the same fissure that had started at dinner when Noah asked a stranger to cut his food. "You know lots of things. You're brilliant at math. Your teachers say you're reading 3 grades above level. That's school stuff." Noah played with the edge of his blanket. "I mean like dad stuff. The kind of things Emma's papa probably teaches her." "Noah," Victoria didn't know how to finish that sentence, didn't know how to explain that his father had chosen Singapore over bedtime stories, that she'd built walls so high around their lives that authentic connection had become impossible to reach, that she'd somehow failed to notice her son was drowning in privilege while starving for something she didn't know how to give. Instead, she pulled him close again. "Mr. Moore seems like someone who might be willing to teach you things, if you ask nicely." "Really?" "Really, but Noah—" She made him look at her. "You understand this is just a play date, right? Just you and Emma being friends, not you and Mr. Moore getting married?" Victoria nearly choked. "What?" "Emma asked if you and her papa were going to fall in love like in movies." Noah's expression was serious. "I said probably not because you don't do stuff like that." "That's accurate." Victoria tried to parse her feelings about her 7-year-old discussing her romantic prospects. "This is just about you and Emma being friends." "Okay." Noah settled back into his pillows. "But, Mama?" "Yes?" "Would it be bad if you did fall in love, sometime, with someone?" The question hung in the air between them, vulnerable and hoping. "No," Victoria heard herself say. "It wouldn't be bad." Noah smiled and closed his eyes. Within minutes, his breathing evened into sleep. Victoria sat there long after he drifted off, watching her son's face in the dim glow of constellation lights, thinking about choices and prices and the difference between being strong and being whole. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Gerald. You think you've won, but that picture is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, the board will beg me to come back." Victoria stared at the threat, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with battle. The old Victoria would have already been strategizing, planning countermoves, preparing to destroy Whitmore before he could damage her reputation further. Instead, she deleted the message and blocked the number. Then she pulled up Caleb's contact and sent one more text. "Thank you. For tonight. For helping. For showing my son what kindness looks like." The response came almost immediately. "Anytime. See you Saturday." Victoria set her phone aside and looked out at the city. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of people navigating their own impossible choices in the space between what they wanted and what they feared. Somewhere out there, Caleb Moore was probably putting his daughter to bed, cutting her toast into perfect triangles for tomorrow's lunch, doing all the small, unglamorous work of raising a child alone. Somewhere out there, Gerald Whitmore was plotting her destruction. Somewhere out there, her company was running on systems she'd built, strategies she'd executed, decisions that had cost her everything except the empire itself. And here, in this penthouse that had never felt like home, Victoria Hale sat beside her sleeping son and wondered whether it was finally time to stop surviving and start living. The thought terrified her, but not as much as the alternative. Not anymore. Saturday arrived wrapped in the kind of crisp autumn sunshine that made the city look almost forgivable. Victoria woke at 6, her usual time, then lay in bed staring at the ceiling for 20 minutes, trying to remember the last time she'd had nowhere urgent to be. The board's written commitments had arrived by 9 a.m. Friday, as requested. Thompson and Richards had resigned with terse letters that reeked of lawyers and burnt bridges. Martinez had sent 3 pages of apology and renewed dedication. The others had fallen in line with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Hale Industries was still hers. The coup had failed. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't touch. Noah appeared in her doorway at 7:15, already dressed in jeans and his favorite striped shirt, the one she'd thought he'd outgrown months ago. "Is it time yet?" "The park isn't until 2. "I know, but I wanted to be ready." And Victoria studied her son's eager face and felt something twist in her chest. "Come here." Noah climbed onto the bed, something he hadn't done in over a year. They sat together watching morning light paint patterns across walls covered with art she'd purchased for investment value rather than beauty. "Are you nervous?" Victoria asked. "A little." Noah picked at the comforter. "What if Emma doesn't like me as much as she did at dinner?" "Why wouldn't she?" "Because dinner was different. We were just eating pasta. But playing is harder. You have to think of games and stuff." He looked up at her with eyes that held more anxiety than any 7-year-old should carry. "I'm not very good at games." "That's not true. You're excellent at chess." "That's not the same. That's sitting still and thinking. Emma probably likes running and climbing and things I don't know how to do." Victoria wanted to argue, to list all the ways Noah was capable and bright and wonderful. But the truth was, she didn't actually know what her son was good at beyond academic achievements and impeccable manners. She'd outsourced play the same way she'd outsourced everything else, to nannies and tutors and expensive programs that promised optimal child development. "Then maybe Emma can teach you," she said finally, "the way her father taught you to twirl pasta." Noah considered this. "Do you think Mr. Moore will be there the whole time, or will he leave like you usually do?" The question wasn't accusatory, just factual. Somehow that made it worse. "I'll be there the whole time," Victoria promised. "No phone calls, no emergencies, just you, me, Emma, and Mr. Moore." "Really?" "Really." Noah's smile could have powered the entire building. They spent the morning doing things Victoria couldn't remember doing before, making pancakes that turned out lopsided and perfect, playing a card game Noah taught her with rules he'd clearly invented himself, sitting on the floor building elaborate structures from blocks she didn't know they owned. At 1:30, Noah started watching the clock with the intensity of a prisoner counting down to freedom. At 1:40, he was putting on his shoes. At 1:50, he was standing by the door with the kind of vibrating energy that made Victoria wonder how much sugar had actually been in those pancakes. Robert drove them across town through weekend traffic that moved with syrup slowness. Noah pressed his face against the window, watching the city transform from glass towers to tree-lined streets to neighborhoods where buildings wore their age like comfortable clothes. Riverside Park looked different in daylight, smaller but somehow more alive. The playground equipment she'd judged as old now showed evidence of recent painting. The grass was worn in places from countless feet, but carefully maintained. A few families scattered across benches and play structures, their laughter carrying on air that smelled like fallen leaves, and the particular sweetness of childhood's last warm afternoons. Victoria spotted them immediately. Emma on the swings, Caleb standing behind her providing carefully measured pushes that sent the girls soaring without going too high. Emma's laughter rang out clear and bright, the kind of sound that made strangers smile without knowing why. Caleb wore jeans and a flannel shirt that had been washed so many times the blue had faded to something softer. He looked relaxed in a way Victoria didn't know how to be, present in a way that seemed effortless but probably cost more than she understood. Noah was out of the car before Victoria could finish thanking Robert. He ran toward the playground with abandon she'd never seen in him, his usual careful composure forgotten entirely. "Emma!" The girl's head whipped around. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Noah!" Caleb caught the swing before Emma could jump off mid-arc. "Easy. Physics still applies even when you're excited." Emma barely waited for the swing to stop before launching herself toward Noah. They collided in a hug that nearly knocked Noah over, both of them talking at once about everything and nothing. Victoria approached more slowly, suddenly uncertain. This had seemed simpler in text messages, just a play date, just children being friends. Now, standing at the edge of this park in clothes that probably cost more than everything Caleb was wearing combined, she felt like an astronaut who'd somehow ended up on the wrong planet. "You made it." Caleb's greeting was warm without being effusive. He didn't try to shake her hand or create any kind of formal greeting, just smiled and nodded toward the children. "Fair warning, Emma's been planning this playdate like a military operation. She has a schedule. Noah's been ready since 7 a.m. Then they're well matched." Caleb gestured to a bench with sightlines to the entire playground. "Shall we let them run themselves into exhaustion while we attempt adult conversation?" "I'm not sure I remember how to do that." "The adult conversation or the relaxing while children play?" "Both." Caleb's laugh was quiet but genuine. "Then we'll figure it out together." They sat on a bench that had been there long enough to have names carved into the wood, declarations of love and friendship, and the eternal optimism of people young enough to believe permanence was possible. Victoria felt absurdly conscious of the space between them, of how strange it was to sit beside someone without an agenda or strategic objective. The children had already migrated to the climbing structure. Emma scaled it with the fearless confidence of someone who'd never been told she was fragile. Noah followed more carefully, testing each handhold before trusting his weight to it. "He's cautious," Caleb observed. "He's been raised to be careful." "There's a difference between careful and afraid." Victoria turned to look at him. "Are you always this direct?" "Usually." "Is that a problem?" "I'm not sure yet." She watched Noah pause halfway up the structure, Emma already at the top calling encouragement. "Most people don't tell billionaire CEOs what they think. Most people aren't sitting in a park on Saturday afternoon. We left our titles at home, remember?" "Did we?" "Because I'm wearing clothes that cost more than your car, and you're wearing a jacket that's been washed about 1,000 times. Titles follow us whether we want them to or not." Caleb glanced down at his flannel. 943 times, actually. I've had it since medical school. Victoria's head snapped toward him. "Medical school." "Johns Hopkins, graduated second in my class." His voice held no pride, just statement of fact. "Trauma surgery residency at Mass General. Board certified, active license, all the credentials that are supposed to matter." "But you're a private consultant." "I consult with people who need medical expertise but can't access traditional care. Immigrant communities, homeless populations, places where an ER visit costs more than 3 months' rent." Caleb kept his eyes on Emma. "The pay's inconsistent, but the work matters." Victoria processed this, recalibrating everything she'd assumed. "You gave up a surgical career to treat people for free?" "I gave up a surgical career to be present for my daughter." Caleb's voice gentled. "Emma's mom died during childbirth. Pulmonary embolism, no warning, nothing we could have done. One minute I was holding my wife's hand, the next I was watching her code while nurses took my newborn daughter to the NICU." The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward into implications Victoria couldn't fully grasp. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Caleb smiled, but his eyes held old grief. "I tried to do both, be a surgeon and raise Emma alone. Lasted about 8 months before I realized I was failing at everything that mattered. I could save strangers' lives at 3 a.m., but I didn't know my own daughter's favorite lullaby. I could perform 18-hour surgeries, but I was feeding her bottles without making eye contact because I was too exhausted to stay present." He paused as Emma called for him to watch her jump from the highest platform. Caleb waved acknowledgement, watching with the kind of attention that said, "I see you. You matter. You're worth every second of focus." "So I quit," he continued once Emma had safely landed. "Walked away from a career I'd spent 12 years building, started consulting part-time, enough to pay rent and buy good pasta. Spent the rest of my time learning to be Emma's father instead of just her exhausted guardian." Victoria felt something shift in her understanding of the man beside her. That must have been terrifying. It was liberating. Caleb turned to look at her directly. Terrifying too, but mostly liberating. Turns out you can survive on a lot less money than you think when you're actually living instead of just existing. Not everyone has that luxury. You're right. I had savings, I had marketable skills, I had options most people don't. He held her gaze. But I also had a choice, and I chose presence over prestige. Best decision I ever made. Noah had reached the top of the climbing structure. Emma was showing him how to slide down the pole, demonstrating technique with the expertise of a seasoned professional. Noah watched, calculating, clearly terrified. "You can do it," Emma encouraged. "Just hold tight and let go a little." Noah looked toward Victoria with uncertainty written across every line of his small body. She found herself standing without deciding to, moving closer to the structure. "You've got this, sweetheart. I'm right here." "What if I fall?" "Then I'll catch you." The words came out before Victoria could analyze them for accuracy. "You're safe." Noah wrapped his hands around the pole, closed his eyes, let himself slide down in controlled descent that ended with both feet on solid ground. His whoop of triumph echoed across the playground. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. It was just a slide. Just a child overcoming minor fear. Nothing worth crying about. Except she couldn't remember the last time Noah had tried something that scared him. Couldn't remember the last time she'd been close enough to catch him if he fell. "Nice job," Caleb said quietly from behind her. He'd followed without her noticing. "Both of you." He slid down a pole. It's not exactly noteworthy. It is when he's been too afraid to try before. Caleb watched Noah and Emma race toward the swings. And it is when his mother put down her phone long enough to be there for it. Victoria's hand moved to her pocket where her phone sat on silent. She'd gotten 17 notifications during the drive over. Hadn't checked any of them. "How did you know I put my phone down?" "Because you're not holding it." Caleb's smile was gentle. "And because you're here, actually here, not physically present while mentally elsewhere. That's harder than it looks." They returned to the bench, settling into comfortable silence as the children played. Emma taught Noah how to pump his legs on the swings. Noah showed Emma a hand-clapping game he'd apparently learned at school. They invented elaborate scenarios involving pirates and dragons and rescue missions that made absolutely no narrative sense but clearly worked perfectly in the logic of childhood. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said after a while. "Sure." "Why did you help me at the office? You could have walked away." Caleb was quiet for a moment, watching the children. "Because I've been where you were. Different circumstances, same spiral. After my wife died, I threw myself into work, thinking if I just stayed busy enough, productive enough, successful enough, the grief couldn't catch me." He rubbed his hands together, the scars on his knuckles catching sunlight. "I collapsed during a surgery. Simple hernia repair, nothing complicated, just stood up from checking vitals and the room started spinning. My attending had to scrub in and finish while I recovered in the same break room where I delivered dozens of similar lectures to overworked residents about the importance of self-care. What changed? Emma learned to crawl while I was at the hospital. The nanny sent me a video and I watched it on my phone between patients." His voice went rough. "I missed my daughter's first major milestone because I was too committed to taking care of everyone except the people who actually needed me." Victoria felt the parallel cut through her defenses like a scalpel. Noah asked me last week when my birthday was. I realized I didn't know when his was without checking my calendar. When is it? March 7th. And yours? November 3rd. Victoria looked at her hands, manicured, unmarked, hands that signed documents but never cut pasta into careful pieces. I missed it this year. Worked through the whole day without realizing until my assistant sent me flowers at 9 p.m. Caleb winced. Ouch. I told myself it didn't matter, that birthdays are arbitrary markers, that focusing on the company was more important than celebrating getting older. But Noah made me a card, drew a picture of the two of us holding hands. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. I found it in my briefcase 3 days later, forgotten under merger documents. He'd never asked if I'd seen it, never mentioned it at all. The silence that followed felt heavy with understanding. You're trying, Caleb said finally. That counts for something. Does it? Because I look at you with Emma and I see this ease, this natural connection, this way of being present that I don't know how to access. You make it look simple. It's not simple, it's just practice. Caleb leaned back against the bench. Every single day I have to choose presence over productivity. Some days I fail. Some days I'm distracted or exhausted or so worried about money that I can barely focus on what Emma's saying. But I keep choosing, keep trying, keep showing up. How do you know if you're doing it right? I don't. That's parenting, constant uncertainty wrapped in unconditional love. He smiled. But Emma laughs easily and tells me her secrets, and isn't afraid to try new things. So I figure I'm probably not destroying her too badly. Noah's laughter carried across the playground as Emma chased him through the climbing structure. Victoria watched her son move with abandon she'd never seen before, hair messy, shirt untucked, completely unself-conscious. He's different here, she said softly. He feels safe. He's safe at home. Safe from danger isn't the same as safe to be yourself. Caleb's observation was gentle but unyielding. Home sounds like a place where everything has to be perfect. This is a place where falling down is just part of the game. Victoria wanted to argue but couldn't find the ground to stand on. Her penthouse was safe in every measurable way. Security, comfort, protection from anything that might hurt or challenge or push back. But was it safe to be messy? To fail? To need things she couldn't provide herself? I don't know how to be the parent he needs, she admitted. None of us do. We're all figuring it out as we go, trying not to screw up too badly. Caleb turned to face her. But you showed up today. You kept your promise. You're sitting on a bench in a park instead of behind a desk in a boardroom. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing compared to what I should be doing. What should you be doing? I don't know. More. Better. Something that doesn't feel like I'm constantly failing at the only job that actually matters. Caleb's smile was knowing. Welcome to parenthood. The guilt is complimentary and never ending. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. The sound surprised her, genuine and unguarded. There it is, Caleb said. What? The person underneath the CEO. She seems nice. She's terrified. Of what? Of wanting this. Victoria gestured to the playground, to their children playing together, to the simplicity of an afternoon that wasn't scheduled or strategic or designed to advance any objective except joy. Of wanting something I don't know how to have. This? This, you. The ease of sitting on a bench without checking my phone every 30 seconds. The possibility that life could be about more than survival. The words hung between them, vulnerable and dangerous. Caleb held her gaze. I'm not a complication you need to manage, Victoria. I'm just a guy who cuts his daughter's pasta and tries to show up for what matters. If that's something you want in your life, in Noah's life, then we figure it out. If it's not, that's okay too. But don't pretend the wanting itself is the problem. What is the problem? That you've spent so long being strong that you've forgotten strong people are allowed to need things too. Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. The same fissure that had started at dinner, widened in the boardroom, and now threatened to split her completely. I don't know how to need people. Then learn. Same way Noah's learning to slide down poles and Emma's learning to share her swings. Caleb's voice gentled. Same way I learned to be a single father instead of a surgeon. one imperfect day at a time. Emma came running over, breathless and bright. "Papa, can Noah come over for dinner? Please, we want to build a fort." Noah appeared behind her, hopeful and trying not to show it. "Can I, Mama? Please?" Victoria looked at Caleb, who raised his eyebrows in a silent question. "Your call." Every instinct screamed to say no, to maintain boundaries, to protect against complications, to keep their worlds separate before things got messy. But Noah was looking at her with those eyes that held too much hope and too much practice at disappointment. And Emma was bouncing with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested fort building was the most important activity humanity had ever conceived. And Caleb was watching her with patient understanding that said he'd accept whatever choice she made without judgment. "What kind of fort are we talking about?" Victoria asked. Emma's eyes went wide with delight. "The biggest one ever, with blankets and chairs and pillows and a secret password." "That sounds structurally complex." "Papa's really good at forts," Emma said with absolute confidence. "He makes them so they don't fall down." "Is that part of medical training?" Caleb grinned. "Surprisingly useful skill in trauma surgery. If you can build a stable fort, you can stabilize a collapsed lung." Victoria found herself smiling. "When you put it that way." "So can he," Emma pressed. "Can Noah come?" "If Mr. Moore doesn't mind cooking for an extra person." "I'm making spaghetti," Caleb said. "There's always enough for extras. That's the rule." "Then yes." Victoria looked at Noah. "You can go." Noah's whoop matched the one he'd made after sliding down the pole. He and Emma took off running, already planning fort specifications with the intensity of architects designing skyscrapers. "You're invited too," Caleb added. "If you want." Victoria should have said no, should have used the time to catch up on work, to shore up boardroom alliances, to prepare for whatever Whitmore was planning. Instead, she heard herself say, "What time?" 6:30? "Emma goes to bed at 8, so we eat early." "We'll be there." Caleb pulled out his phone, typed quickly, then showed her the screen. "My address. Fair warning, it's not a penthouse." The address was in a neighborhood Victoria had driven through but never stopped in. The kind of place where buildings had character instead of concierge services, where people knew their neighbors' names. "I didn't expect it to be." "Good." Caleb stood, stretching. "I should probably supervise the fort planning before they decide it needs to be 3 stories tall." He walked toward the children, leaving Victoria alone on the bench with her thoughts and her phone and the strange, terrifying lightness that came from choosing presence over productivity. She pulled out her phone. 17 notifications had become 34 messages from Marcus about the Whitmore situation, from her attorney about Richards and Thompson's resignations, from her assistant about Monday's schedule, from 3 board members with various questions and concerns. Victoria read them all. Then she put her phone back in her pocket without responding to any of them. For the first time in 12 years, the Empire could wait. She had a fort to help build. Caleb's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building that had probably been elegant in the 1940s and was now working hard to maintain dignified. The elevator worked but groaned about it. The hallway carpet showed wear patterns from decades of footsteps. Someone was cooking something with garlic 3 doors down, and a child's bicycle leaned against the wall near the stairs. Victoria felt absurdly conspicuous in her designer jeans and cashmere sweater as Caleb unlocked the door marked 3F. "Welcome to Chaos Central," he said, pushing the door open. The apartment was smaller than Victoria's living room, but somehow contained entire universes. Books stacked on every surface, not for display, but clearly read and reread. Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator in layers of construction paper and tempera paint. A couch that sagged in the middle, but was piled with pillows that actually looked comfortable. Plants on the windowsill growing with enthusiastic disorder. The kind of mess that came from living rather than existing. "It's perfect," Noah breathed. Emma grabbed his hand. "Come on, I'll show you my room, and we can start fort planning." The children disappeared down a short hallway, leaving Victoria standing in the entryway feeling like an anthropologist who'd accidentally stepped into a civilization she didn't understand. "You can sit," Caleb said, amused. "The couch doesn't bite." "I'm just taking it in." Victoria moved farther into the space, drawn to the photographs clustered on one wall. Emma as a newborn, tiny and wrinkled. Emma learning to walk, Caleb's hands hovering nearby. Emma covered in what looked like chocolate cake, laughing with pure joy. Each photo radiated the kind of presents Victoria paid photographers thousands of dollars to manufacture in staged family portraits. "Those are my favorites," Caleb said from the kitchen area. "The messy ones where she's actually being herself." "You take them yourself?" "Mostly. I'm not good at it, but I'm consistent." He was pulling ingredients from the refrigerator with practiced efficiency. "Wine? Or are you on CEO duty even on Saturdays?" "Wine sounds good, actually." He poured 2 glasses of something red that probably cost $20 instead of $200. Victoria took a sip and discovered it tasted better than most of the expensive bottles in her collection. "Can I help?" she asked. "Can you dice an onion?" "I run a multi-billion-dollar company. I think I can handle an onion." Caleb's grin was wicked. Famous last words. He handed her a cutting board, a knife, and an onion. Victoria stared at the vegetable like it might contain classified intelligence. When was the last time she'd actually prepared food? She had a chef on staff. Before that, she'd survived on takeout and meal services and whatever could be consumed while reading quarterly reports. "You don't know how to cut an onion," Caleb observed. "I know the theoretical approach. Theory versus practice. The eternal divide." He moved behind her, his hands covering hers on the knife. "Like this. Cut it in half first, then peel off the skin." His voice was close to her ear, his presence warm without being presumptuous. Victoria was suddenly hyper-aware of how long it had been since someone had stood this close, had touched her with casual familiarity, had treated her like a person learning something new, instead of an authority who should already know everything. "Now thin slices," Caleb continued, guiding her hands. "Let the knife do the work." Victoria made the first cut, uneven but successful. Then another. By the third slice, she'd found a rhythm. "There you go." Caleb stepped back, giving her space. "You're a natural." "I'm really not." "You're trying. That's better than natural talent." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Caleb browning meat and crushing garlic, while Victoria massacred the onion with improving competence. From Emma's room came the sound of furniture being moved and whispered planning sessions conducted with the gravity of military operations. "They're going to destroy your daughter's room," Victoria said. "They're going to have fun. The room will survive." Caleb added the onions to the pan, where they sizzled and released scents that made Victoria's mouth water. "Besides, Emma's been lonely. She asks about other kids at the park constantly, but most of them are younger or older. Finding someone her age who actually wants to play with her? That's worth a messy room." "Noah's been lonely too. I just didn't notice until he asked a stranger to cut his pasta." "He didn't ask a stranger. He asked someone who was paying attention." Caleb stirred the sauce with the kind of focus most people reserved for complex equations. "Kids are smart about who sees them." "Is that why Emma took to Noah so quickly?" "Probably. She recognized another kid who's learned to be careful instead of carefree." He glanced toward the hallway where faint giggles emerged from behind a closed door. "I worry about her sometimes, about whether she's too serious, too aware of how fragile things are. She doesn't remember her mom, but she knows there's a missing piece that other kids have." Victoria set down the knife, onion successfully decimated. "How do you handle that?" "The questions about her mother." "Honestly," Caleb poured wine into the sauce, steam rising fragrant and rich. "I tell her that her mom was brilliant and brave and loved her more than anything in the world. That she died being brave, giving Emma life. I show her pictures and tell her stories and make sure she knows she came from love even if she can't remember it." "That must be incredibly hard." "It is, but harder would be lying to her or pretending the loss doesn't exist." He met Victoria's eyes. "What about Noah? Does he ask about his father?" "Sometimes. Less now than when he was younger." Victoria accepted the wine glass Caleb handed her, grateful for something to do with her hands. His father decided parenting was incompatible with startup culture. Last I heard, he was in Singapore building some kind of cryptocurrency platform. He sends money for birthdays and Christmas. Never visits. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He showed me who he was before Noah was born. I just didn't want to believe that someone could care more about an app than their own child." "His loss." Caleb's voice was firm. Noah's an incredible kid. He is, and I keep finding new ways to fail him. You're here. You diced an onion. You're learning to be present. Caleb began boiling water for pasta. That's not failing. That's growing. From the bedroom came a crash followed by Emma's voice. It's okay. We meant to do that. Caleb sighed fondly. Should probably check on the structural integrity of Fort Chaos. I'll go, Victoria said. You're busy. She walked down the hallway, past a bathroom barely big enough for a shower, past what must be Caleb's room with the door open, revealing a neatly made bed and more books, to Emma's room at the end. The scene that greeted her was glorious disaster. Blankets draped between furniture created a tunnel system that defied physics. Pillows formed battlements around what appeared to be a central command center. Chairs served as support beams for a ceiling constructed from bedsheets. Noah and Emma crouched inside their creation, flashlights in hand, deep in discussion about something critically important. Wow, Victoria said. Both children's heads popped up. Emma beamed. Do you like it? It's... Victoria searched for appropriate vocabulary. Architecturally ambitious. Noah said we should reinforce the left wall, Emma explained, because it keeps sagging. He's really smart about structures. Noah's face glowed with pride. I just thought about how buildings work. You need support that goes all the way to the floor. Can you come in? Emma asked Victoria. There's room if you crawl. Victoria looked at her cashmere sweater, her designer jeans, her life that had been carefully constructed to avoid situations that required crawling. Then she got on her hands and knees and crawled into the fort. The world inside was different, dim and cozy, and smelling like children and imagination. Flashlight beams created patterns on sheet ceiling like strange constellations. Victoria settled cross-legged between Noah and Emma, her head barely clearing the blanket roof. This is the command center, Emma explained with absolute seriousness. We're planning the dragon defense. Dragons are attacking? Always, Noah said solemnly. That's why we need the fort and the secret password. What's the password? Emma and Noah exchanged glances. We can't tell you until you're officially part of the fort team, Emma said. You have to pass the test. There's a test? You have to tell us your favorite food, Noah explained, and it has to be true. The fort knows if you're lying. Victoria considered this seriously. Spaghetti. Emma's eyes narrowed. Really? That's your favorite? It is now. Victoria looked at Noah. Because someone taught my son how to twirl it properly. Noah's smile could have lit the entire fort. Emma nodded approval. The password is pasta power, Emma declared. Welcome to the team. They spent 20 minutes discussing dragon defense strategies with the kind of detailed planning Victoria usually reserved for merger negotiations. Emma argued for offensive tactics involving catapults made from spatulas. Noah suggested diplomatic approach backed by show of strength. Victoria found herself contributing ideas about resource management and supply chain logistics that somehow made perfect sense in the context of imaginary dragon warfare. Dinner's ready. Caleb's voice came from the kitchen. 5 more minutes, Emma called back. Now, or the spaghetti gets cold and the dragons win by default. Emma gasped. He's right. Cold spaghetti means the dragons win. She scrambled out of the fort with Noah close behind. Victoria followed more slowly, emerging from the blanket tunnel feeling rumpled and slightly dizzy, and more alive than she'd felt in months. Caleb had set the table, mismatched plates and silverware that didn't match either, paper napkins with cheerful patterns, a water pitcher that had seen better years. The spaghetti sat in a large bowl in the center, sauce rich and fragrant, steam rising like promises. They ate family style, passing the bowl and serving each other with the kind of casual intimacy that spoke of practice and presence. Emma talked non-stop about the fort's defensive capabilities. Noah contributed strategic analysis between careful bites of properly cooled pasta. Caleb asked questions that showed he was actually listening rather than just waiting for his turn to talk. Victoria found herself relaxing in increments she could barely measure. Her phone was in her purse in the living room. The board meeting felt like something from another lifetime. The empire she'd built existed somewhere beyond this small apartment with its mismatched furniture and genuine warmth. Ms. Hale, Emma said suddenly, You can call me Victoria. Victoria. Emma tested the name carefully. Do you have a fort at your house? I don't, actually. Why not? I suppose I never thought to build one. Emma's expression suggested this was the saddest thing she'd ever heard. Everyone needs a fort, for dragon defense, and for hiding when the world gets too loud, Noah added quietly. Victoria looked at her son, seeing things she'd missed. Do you hide a lot? Sometimes, when Ms. Patterson has too many lessons planned, or when the apartment feels too big and quiet. The casual admission hit harder than any boardroom betrayal. Her son was lonely in a penthouse with every material comfort she could provide. Maybe we should build a fort at our place, Victoria heard herself say. Noah's eyes went wide. Really? Really, though I'll need instruction on proper construction techniques. Papa can teach you, Emma said immediately. Look, he's the best fort builder in the world. Caleb smiled. I don't know about the world, but I do have a pretty solid track record. Then maybe you could come over sometime, Victoria said. Both of you. We have a living room that's criminally underutilized. The invitation hung in the air, more significant than it should be, weighted with implications Victoria wasn't ready to examine. We'd like that, Caleb said simply. After dinner, Emma and Noah returned to their fort while Caleb and Victoria tackled dishes. They worked in comfortable rhythm. She washed, he dried, their hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water. Thank you, Victoria said quietly. For this. For including us. Thank you for coming, for trying. Caleb set a dried plate on the stack. I know this isn't your usual Saturday night. My usual Saturday night involves spreadsheets and strategic planning sessions I pretend are relaxation. Sounds terrible. It is. Victoria scrubbed at a stubborn spot of sauce. But it's what I know, what I've built my life around. Does it make you happy? The question was simple. The answer was complicated. It makes me successful. That's not the same thing. I know. Victoria rinsed the last dish, watching water swirl down the drain. But success was supposed to be enough. Build the empire. Prove I could do what my father did. Give Noah every advantage. And my son asked strangers to cut his food because I've been too busy being successful to notice he's hungry for connection. She turned to face Caleb. And I collapse in boardrooms because I've forgotten how to take care of myself. And I sit in a penthouse that costs more than most people earn in a lifetime, feeling lonelier than I've ever been. Caleb dried his hands slowly, holding her gaze. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. Change everything? Change nothing? Find some impossible middle ground between being Victoria Hale, the CEO, and being someone who knows how to build forts? It's not impossible, it's just hard. Everything's hard. But not everything matters this much. Caleb gestured toward the hallway where children's laughter leaked from underneath a bedroom door. That matters. The rest is just noise. Before Victoria could respond, her phone erupted from her purse in the living room, the specific ringtone she'd assigned to emergencies only. Caleb raised his eyebrows. Noise? I should check it. Yeah, you should. Victoria retrieved her phone, seeing Marcus's name flashing urgently. She answered. What's wrong? Where are you? Marcus's voice was tight with stress. I've been calling for hours. I'm at dinner. What happened? Whitmore happened. He leaked everything to the press. The boardroom collapse, the picture from the restaurant, some creative interpretation of your mental state. It's all over financial news sites. Bloomberg's running a feature questioning your fitness for leadership. Ice flooded Victoria's system. The familiar rush of crisis mode, of problems that needed solving, of empire that needed protecting. Send me the articles. I'll draft a response. Victoria, it's worse than that. 3 major investors are calling emergency meetings Monday. They want reassurance that you're still capable of running the company. Of course I'm capable. Are you? Marcus's question was gentle but unyielding. Because right now, you're at some guy's apartment eating spaghetti while your company faces the biggest PR crisis of your career. Victoria looked toward the hallway, toward the sound of her son laughing with his first real friend, toward the life she'd just started imagining might be possible. I'll handle it, she said. When? Tomorrow. Tonight I'm having dinner with my son. Victoria sits. Tomorrow, Marcus. Send me everything tonight and I'll review it. We'll strategize Sunday and be ready for whatever Monday brings. She hung up before he could argue. Caleb was watching her from the kitchen, expression carefully neutral. Everything okay? Everything's complicated. Victoria set her phone down with deliberate finality. But it can wait until tomorrow. But can it? Because you look like you just got news that requires immediate CEO intervention. I did, and it does. But right now I'm choosing to be here instead of there. Even if it costs you? Especially if it costs me, Victoria moved toward the hallway. Because my son is in a blanket fort playing with his first real friend, and I've missed too many moments already. The Empire can survive one night without my attention. Caleb's smile was slow and warm. That's probably the bravest thing I've heard all week. Or the most foolish. Sometimes those are the same thing. They found the children fast asleep inside the fort. Emma curled on one side, Noah on the other, flashlights still clutched in small hands. The fort had partially collapsed around them, blankets settling like protective wings. Should we wake them? Victoria whispered. Give it a minute. Caleb crouched beside the fort, looking at their sleeping children with the kind of tenderness that made Victoria's chest ache. They look peaceful. They look perfect. All kids look perfect when they're sleeping. It's their evolutionary defense mechanism. Victoria laughed softly. She pulled out her phone, took a photo of Noah sleeping in the fort, hair messy, shirt twisted, face relaxed in ways she rarely saw during waking hours. Send me that? Caleb asked. You want a picture of our kids sleeping in a destroyed fort? I want to remember what it looks like when they're this happy. He met her eyes. When we're this happy. The word hung between them, we, as if they were already something together, already building something that required pronouns and shared memories and futures that intertwined. Caleb, I know, it's too soon. We barely know each other. You're dealing with a PR crisis, and I'm just a guy who makes spaghetti. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. But Noah and Emma are already friends, and you and I, we could be too, if you wanted. What if I want more than friendship? The question escaped before Victoria's filter could catch it. She watched surprise flicker across Caleb's face, followed by something that looked dangerously close to hope. Then we figure that out too, he said quietly. One imperfect day at a time. I don't know how to do this. Dating or relationships or whatever this is becoming, I'm terrible at anything that isn't business. Good thing I'm not a business transaction. Good thing I'm starting to understand that. They looked at each other across the ruins of a blanket fort. Two people who'd built their lives around different kinds of survival, discovering they might want to build something new together. Noah stirred, mumbling something about dragons. Emma rolled over, still fast asleep. I should get him home, Victoria said reluctantly. Yeah. Caleb gently lifted the blanket, extracting Emma with practiced ease. Come on, buddy, time to wake up. Noah's eyes opened slowly, confusion giving way to recognition. Did we fall asleep in the fort? You defended it so well you earned a rest, Victoria told him. Did we win against the dragons? Decisively. Noah smiled, letting Victoria help him out of the collapsed structure. Emma mumbled goodbye without fully waking. Caleb walked them to the door. Emma draped over his shoulder like a sleepy koala. Thank you for tonight, Victoria said, for everything. Thank you for taking a chance on spaghetti and forts. Can we do it again? The fort building or the dinner? Both. All of it. Victoria looked at Noah yawning beside her. Maybe next time at my place? I'd like that. Caleb shifted Emma slightly. Fair warning, though. My fort building might not be as impressive in a penthouse. Different structural challenges. I'm sure you'll adapt. Is that CEO speak for figure it out? It's human speak for I trust you. Caleb's expression softened. That's probably the second bravest thing you've said all week. They said goodnight in the fluorescent hallway with its worn carpet and bicycle against the wall. Noah hugged Emma's sleeping form with gentle care. Victoria's hand brushed Caleb's as they navigated the awkward geometry of goodbye. In the car ride home, Noah pressed his face against the window, watching the city transform from lived-in neighborhoods back to glass towers and calculated wealth. Mama? Hmm? I really like Emma. And Mr. Moore. I like them too. Are we going to see them again? Really? Or was that just something you said to be nice? Victoria thought about the crisis waiting in her email, the investors demanding reassurance, the articles questioning her competence. Thought about how easy it would be to retreat back into the fortress of her empire, to choose safety over risk. Really, she said. We're going to see them again. Promise? Promise. Noah smiled and closed his eyes, settling into sleep with the kind of peace Victoria couldn't remember feeling at any age. She pulled out her phone as the car merged onto the highway. Marcus had sent 47 emails. The Bloomberg article was scathing. 3 investors wanted emergency calls first thing Monday morning. Victoria read it all, letting the familiar weight settle across her shoulders. Then she opened a new message to Caleb. Thank you for teaching us about forts and pasta and choosing presence over productivity. I'm still learning, but I want to keep trying. His response came quickly. That's all any of us can do. Sleep well, Victoria. You've got dragons to fight tomorrow. She smiled despite everything. With proper fort defenses, I think we'll win. I think you will too. Victoria looked at her sleeping son, at the city beyond the windows, at the empire she'd built, and the life she was just beginning to imagine. Tomorrow she'd face the investors and the articles and whatever Whitmore had planned. Tomorrow she'd be Victoria Hale, billionaire CEO, fighting to keep everything she'd spent 12 years building. But tonight she'd been someone who cut onions badly and crawled into blanket forts and learned that being strong enough to be vulnerable might be the bravest thing she'd ever attempted. And that was enough. For now, it was more than enough. Sunday morning arrived with rain that turned the city gray and introspective. Victoria woke at 5, her mind already cataloging crises and calculating responses. The Bloomberg article had spawned 12 more across financial media. Social media had exploded with theories ranging from reasonable concern to absolute fiction. Somewhere in the noise, Gerald Whitmore was probably celebrating. She made coffee and opened her laptop, ready to do what she'd always done, build the fortress higher, seal the cracks, prove that Victoria Hale was invulnerable. Instead, she found herself staring at the photo from last night. Noah asleep in the fort, face peaceful, finally looking like the child he was instead of the careful adult he'd learned to be. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, already awake and strategizing. Conference call with the investors at 9. I've prepared talking points. You need to be flawless. Victoria typed back, send me everything. I'll be ready. She spent the next 3 hours reviewing articles, preparing responses, building the armor she'd need to survive Monday's onslaught. The rain continued its steady assault on the windows, the city barely visible through the gray. At 8:30, Noah appeared in her office doorway, hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. You're working. Just getting ready for tomorrow. Is it because of the articles? The ones saying you're not good at your job? Victoria's hand stilled on the keyboard. You saw those? Miss Patterson was reading them. She tried to hide her phone, but I saw. Noah moved into the office, settling in the chair across from her desk, the same chair where important executives sat and made decisions worth millions. Are they true? What do you think? Noah considered this with the seriousness he brought to everything. I think you're really good at running your company, but I also think maybe you're tired. That's very perceptive. Emma's papa says being tired doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've been strong for too long without resting. Victoria felt something crack in her chest. He's right. So maybe you should rest. I can't. Not right now. Tomorrow I have to convince important people that I'm still capable of doing my job. But you are capable. They don't think so. They think I'm distracted by... Victoria paused, unsure how to explain corporate politics to a 7-year-old. By things that aren't work. You mean by me? And Emma and Mr. Moore? By having a life outside the office. Noah was quiet for a moment, processing. If you have to choose, you should choose the company. That's more important. The casual acceptance in his voice destroyed something in Victoria. Noah, that's not... It's okay, Mama. I understand. The company was here first, before me. He stood, already retreating into the careful politeness that made him so easy to manage. I'll go ask Ms. Patterson to make breakfast. Noah, wait. But he was already gone, leaving Victoria alone with her laptop and her crisis, and the devastating realization that her son had learned to make himself smaller to fit into the spaces her empire left behind. She sat there for a long moment, rain drumming against windows, the city invisible beyond the gray. Then she closed her laptop and went to find her son. Noah was in the kitchen, explaining to Ms. Patterson that he wanted pancakes, but only if it wasn't too much trouble. The nanny was already pulling out ingredients, her phone face down on the counter displaying the Bloomberg article's damning headline. "Ms. Patterson, could you give us a moment?" The nanny nodded, retreating to her room with the kind of discretion Victoria paid her extremely well for. Victoria sat beside Noah at the kitchen island, the marble surface cold and expensive and never used for anything as messy as actual cooking. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "About what you said. About choosing the company over you." Noah shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "It's true, though. The company needs you. I just want you." The distinction landed like a physical blow. "Noah, look at me." Victoria waited until his eyes met hers. "You are not less important than Hale Industries. You are not something I have to choose against. You're my son, and you matter more than any boardroom or investor or article questioning my competence. But they're saying you're bad at your job because you spend time with me. They're saying I'm bad at my job because I spent 12 minutes having dinner with you and your friend. Because I collapsed from exhaustion after years of pretending I didn't need sleep or food or human connection. Because I finally started acting like a person instead of a machine." Victoria pulled Noah closer. "And you know what? If those things make me bad at my job in their eyes, then maybe the job needs to change, not me." "But you love your job." "I love you more." Noah's eyes went wide, like he'd been waiting his entire life to hear those words, and didn't quite believe them now that they'd arrived. "Really?" "Really, and I'm sorry it took me so long to show you that." "So you're not going to stop seeing Emma and Mr. Moore?" "I'm not going to stop living my life to make investors comfortable." Victoria hugged him properly, feeling how small he still was despite his too adult understanding. "We're going to figure this out, together." "How?" "I have absolutely no idea, but we'll start with pancakes and go from there." They made pancakes together, Victoria following Noah's increasingly confident instructions, both of them getting batter on the counter and not caring. The pancakes turned out lumpy and imperfect and tasted better than anything Victoria's chef had ever prepared. At 9 a.m., Victoria's phone rang. Marcus's name flashed urgently. "I have to take this," she told Noah. "But stay here. I want you to hear this." She answered on speaker. "Marcus, are you ready? The investors are waiting." "Tell them we'll reschedule." Silence. Then, "Victoria, you can't reschedule an emergency meeting they called. That makes you look like someone who has priorities that include her family." Victoria looked at Noah across the batter-splattered counter. "Tell them I'll meet Tuesday. Tomorrow I'm spending the day preparing a comprehensive response to Whitmore's attacks and reassessing what leadership at Hale Industries actually means." "They won't like that." "Then they can sell their shares. I'll buy them out myself if necessary." "That's not—" "Victoria, are you sure about this?" "More sure than I've been about anything in years." She paused. "Marcus, do you have kids?" "2 daughters. Why?" "When's the last time you made them pancakes?" What does that have to do with—" "When?" "I don't know. My wife usually handles breakfast. I'm at the office by 6 most mornings." "Maybe you shouldn't be." Victoria watched Noah's face, seeing hope bloom in his expression. "Maybe we've all been doing this wrong. Building empires while missing the things that actually make life worth living. That's a pretty radical philosophy for a CEO." "Then maybe I'm a radical CEO." Victoria smiled. "I'll see you Tuesday, Marcus. Enjoy your Sunday. Make your daughters pancakes." She hung up before he could argue. Noah stared at her. "You just canceled a really important meeting to make pancakes with me." "I did." "Won't that make everything worse?" "Probably. But it will also make something better." Victoria flipped a pancake with more confidence than the situation warranted. "I'm done letting fear of what might happen stop me from being present for what's happening right now." They spent the day doing nothing productive by CEO standards and everything essential by human ones. They built the beginnings of a fort in the living room using furniture that cost more than most cars. They watched movies Noah had been wanting to see for months. They ordered pizza and ate it on the floor because the dining table felt too formal for the life they were trying to build. At 4 p.m., Victoria's phone rang. Caleb's name appeared, and she felt something warm unfold in her chest. "Hey," she answered. "Hey yourself, how's the dragon fighting going?" "I'm taking a tactical pause to regroup." Smart strategy. She could hear the smile in his voice. "Emma wants to know if Noah's available for a video call. Apparently there are critical fort design updates that require immediate consultation." Victoria looked at Noah, who was already bouncing with anticipation. "I think that can be arranged." They set up the video call on Victoria's laptop, Noah and Emma immediately launching into intense discussion about blanket tensile strength and pillow placement optimization. Victoria and Caleb smiled at each other across the screen while their children planned architectural marvels. "You look different," Caleb said quietly. "Different how?" "Less fortified. More present." "I canceled a meeting with angry investors to make pancakes." "How'd that go?" "The pancakes were terrible. The decision was perfect." Victoria watched Noah gesture enthusiastically about support beam theory. "I'm probably destroying my career, and I've never felt more certain about anything." "That's because you're finally fighting for what actually matters." "Is that your professional medical opinion?" "That's my personal experience talking." Caleb's expression softened. "After my wife died, everyone told me I was destroying my career by stepping back, that I'd regret giving up surgery, that Emma would be fine with nannies, and I was making an emotional decision I'd pay for later." "Do you regret it?" "Not for a single second." He glanced at Emma, who was now drawing fort blueprints to show Noah. "Best decision I ever made, scariest too." "I'm terrified," Victoria admitted. "I have no idea what I'm doing or whether any of this will work out." "Welcome to parenthood, and life, and relationships that actually matter." Caleb's smile was warm. "But you're not doing it alone anymore. That's something." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you barely know me. I barely know you. And we're letting our children get attached to each other based on spaghetti and fort building." "You're right. We should probably know more about each other before this goes any further." Caleb leaned back, thoughtful. "Okay, rapid-fire questions. What's your biggest fear? Besides failing as a mother and losing my company?" "Besides those." Victoria thought about it. "Being invisible, mattering so little that my presence or absence makes no difference." "That's not going to happen." "How do you know?" "Because you've spent 12 years building an empire people notice. Because your sun lights up when you pay attention. Because I've watched you choose presence over productivity, and it's the bravest thing I've seen in years." Caleb's eyes held hers through the screen. "You matter, Victoria. Not because of your company or your money or your success, because of who you are when you let people see past the armor." "What if who I am isn't enough? What if it's everything?" The question hung between them, impossible to answer, impossible to ignore. Emma and Noah had moved on from fort design to planning their next playdate with the kind of calendar coordination that would impress executive assistants. Victoria listened to her son negotiate schedules and make plans with the confidence of someone who finally believed good things might last. "Tuesday," Noah was saying. "We could do Tuesday after school." "I have ballet," Emma countered. "But Wednesday's good. Wednesday works." Noah looked at Victoria. "Right, Mama? We can do Wednesday?" Victoria thought about her schedule, board meetings and investor calls and crisis management sessions that would determine whether she kept her company. Thought about how easy it would be to say no, to protect Noah from disappointment by keeping their worlds separate. "Wednesday works," she said. Caleb raised his eyebrows. "You're sure? That's 2 days after your investor meetings." "Which means I'll either be celebrating or commiserating. Either way, I'd rather do it with friends." Victoria smiled. "And my son's right. Wednesday works." They ended the call with promises and plans and the kind of hope that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. That night, Victoria sat in her office reviewing the materials Marcus had prepared. The talking points were solid, clinical, defensive, designed to prove she was still the same Victoria Hale who'd built Hale Industries into a powerhouse. She deleted them all and started writing something new. Monday morning arrived with cloudless skies and the kind of crisp air that promised change. Victoria dressed for battle, her sharpest suit, her most expensive shoes, armor that announced she was not to be underestimated. But she left her hair down instead of pulled back, left the extra layer of makeup that made her look invulnerable, small changes that whispered defiance. Noah hugged her at the door with fierce intensity. "Good luck fighting dragons, Mama." "I learned from the best fort defenders." Victoria kissed the top of his head. "I'll be home for dinner, real dinner, where we sit down together." "Promise?" "Promise." The drive to Hale Industries felt different. The city looked the same, glass and steel and ambition compressed into vertical miles. But Victoria saw it through new eyes, saw the park where Noah and Emma had played, saw the neighborhood where Caleb's apartment sat with its comfortable disorder and genuine warmth, saw possibilities she'd been too fortified to notice before. Marcus met her in the lobby, tension written across every line of his body. "Are you ready?" "Probably not, but I'm doing it anyway." "Victoria, these investors aren't here for radical philosophy about work-life balance. They want reassurance that you're still the cold-blooded CEO who's made them millions." "Then I'm going to disappoint them." Victoria stepped into the elevator, Marcus scrambling to follow. Because that Victoria Hale was slowly killing herself and teaching her son that love is something you schedule between meetings. "So what's the plan?" "The truth." "That's not a plan. That's career suicide. Or it's the first honest thing I've done in 12 years. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor. "Trust me, Marcus." "I'm trying, but you're making it really hard." The conference room was full. Investors she'd courted and convinced, board members who'd pledged loyalty, analysts who'd questioned her decisions before. All of them watching as she entered, evaluating whether Victoria Hale was still worth their faith. She set her materials on the table, not the defensive talking points Marcus had prepared, but something else entirely. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know you're here because recent events have raised questions about my fitness for leadership, about whether I'm still capable of running this company with the focus and dedication it deserves." Heads nodded. Someone cleared their throat meaningfully. "The answer is no," Victoria said. The room went completely silent. "I'm not capable of running this company the way I have been, because the way I've been running it was destroying me, neglecting my son, and prioritizing performance over humanity." She looked around the table, meeting eyes that had gone wide with shock. "I collapsed in this very room because I'd forgotten how to eat or sleep or acknowledge that human beings aren't machines. And then I got up and went right back to the same destructive patterns because I was too afraid to admit that something fundamental needed to change." Martinez leaned forward. "Victoria, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that Hale Industries needs a CEO who understands that sustainable success isn't built on burnout, that leadership means modeling healthy choices, not martyrdom, that the same qualities that make me a good mother, presence, attention, willingness to adapt, are exactly what this company needs." She pulled out her new proposal. "So I'm implementing changes. Mandatory limits on executive working hours. Parental leave that actually allows parents to be present. Mental health support for all employees. Company culture that values results over performance theater." "That's going to cost millions," someone objected. "It's going to save lives." Victoria's voice didn't waver. "And it's going to make us the kind of company people actually want to work for, instead of the kind they endure until something better comes along." "This is insane," another investor said. "You're proposing we completely restructure corporate culture because you had a dinner with some random guy and his kid?" "I'm proposing we restructure because our current culture is unsustainable and actively harmful." Victoria met the challenge directly. "And yes, having dinner with Caleb Moore and his daughter showed me what I've been missing. Showed me that there's a way to be successful without sacrificing everything that makes success meaningful." "Who is he?" The question came from the back of the room. "This Caleb Moore everyone's talking about?" "He's someone who gave up a prestigious surgical career to be present for his daughter. Someone who taught my son that care doesn't have to be delegated. Someone who showed me that being strong means being brave enough to be human." "So you're dating him?" "I'm getting to know him. And yes, I hope that becomes something more." Victoria smiled. "Because for the first time in 12 years, I'm choosing to build a life instead of just an empire." The room erupted into arguments and objections and questions that blurred together into white noise. Victoria let them talk, let them process, let them realize she wasn't going to be convinced to retreat back into the fortress she'd spent a decade building. Finally, Martinez raised his hand for quiet. Victoria, I respect what you're trying to do, but these investors have legitimate concerns. How do we know this isn't just a temporary crisis response? How do we know you're still committed to making Hale Industries successful? Because I'm more committed now than I've ever been. Victoria's voice was steady. I'm committed to building a company I'd be proud to pass on to my son, one that values people over profit margins, one that understands success isn't measured in quarters, but in the quality of lives we impact. She pulled up the final slide of her presentation, not financial projections or strategic roadmaps, but a photo. Noah asleep in the blanket fort, face peaceful, finally allowed to be the child he was. This is my son, Victoria said quietly. He's 7 years old. He's brilliant and kind, and until last week, he didn't know how to ask for help because I'd taught him that needing things was weakness. That's on me. That's what happens when you build an empire on the belief that being invulnerable is the same as being strong. She looked around the room. So yes, I'm changing. The company's changing. We're going to prioritize sustainability over unsustainable growth. We're going to value our people as much as our profits. And if that means some of you want to sell your shares, I understand. But I'm not going back to who I was before. That version of Victoria Hale was dying slowly, and she was taking her son down with her. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Martinez started clapping, slowly at first, then louder. Others joined him. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to matter. I have 2 daughters, Martinez said, and I can't remember the last time I made them pancakes, so maybe this radical CEO is onto something. The meeting continued for another hour. Arguments and negotiations and compromises that felt more honest than any boardroom discussion Victoria had ever participated in. Some investors left angry, others pledged renewed support. The board split along lines she hadn't expected but could live with. When it was over, Marcus found her in her office staring out at the city that had once seemed like territory to conquer and now looked more like home. That was either brilliant or insane, he said. Possibly both. You know Whitmore's going to use this, going to say you've lost your mind, that you're unfit for leadership. Let him. Victoria turned to face her CFO. I'd rather be unfit by his standards than successful by mine anymore. So what happens now? Now we build something better. Victoria smiled. And I go home to have dinner with my son, because I promised, and those promises matter more than anything in this office. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You're really doing this, completely restructuring your life. I am. It's terrifying. It's necessary. Victoria gathered her things. Marcus, go home. Make your daughters those pancakes. The empire will still be here tomorrow. Will you? Every day? Just not all day. Not anymore. Victoria left the office at 5 p.m., unprecedented in her 12-year tenure. The sun was still out, the city bathed in golden light that made everything look possible. Her phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, some concerned, some predicting her imminent downfall. She ignored them all and called Caleb instead. How'd it go? He answered. I told a room full of investors that I'm restructuring my entire company culture because you taught my son to twirl pasta. Oh, good. No pressure then. Victoria laughed, genuine and free. Want to have dinner tonight? You, Emma, me, and Noah? I promised him I'd be home, and I'd like you there. Victoria, are you sure? If investors are already questioning what... I'm sure. I'm done hiding the things that matter. I'm done pretending I can build an empire without building a life. She paused. Unless you're not ready for that. For whatever this is becoming. I've been ready since you crawled into a blanket fort in a cashmere sweater. Caleb's voice was warm. What time? 6:30. I'll send a car. We can take the subway. Caleb? Fine. But for the record, the subway's faster. They had dinner in Victoria's penthouse. The space that had always felt too big and cold now filled with laughter and pasta sauce, and 2 children explaining fort construction techniques with the seriousness of engineers. Emma was awed by the space, but more interested in the view. Noah showed her his room with shy pride. Caleb and Victoria stood at the windows watching the city light up in layers of gold and white and possibility. "This is really happening," Victoria said. "What is?" "This, us, whatever we're building." "Scares you?" "Terrifies me." She looked at him. "But not as much as the alternative." "Which is?" "Going back to who I was before. Before you showed me that pasta can be about more than nutrition. Before Noah learned he's allowed to need things. Before I understood that being strong means being brave enough to be vulnerable." Caleb took her hand, his scarred and steady, hers unmarked and trembling slightly. "So what do we do now?" "We keep showing up, keep choosing presence, keep building forts and making mistakes, and figuring out how to do this impossible thing where we're both individuals and becoming something together." That's pretty wise for a CEO who just restructured her entire company on a whim. Not a whim. A revelation. Victoria laced her fingers through his. "You showed me what I was missing, what Noah was missing, what my whole life was missing because I'd been too afraid to want anything I couldn't control. And now? Now I want everything I can't control. The mess and the uncertainty and the risk of caring about someone who might not stay. I want all of it." Caleb's smile was slow and warm. "Good, because Emma's already planning our next 5 playdates, and I'm pretty sure she's decided you and Noah are permanent fixtures in our life. Is that okay with you?" "Victoria, I've been alone since my wife died. Emma's been my whole world, and that's been enough because it had to be. But watching you choose your son over your empire, watching you be brave enough to want more, that's..." He paused, searching for words. "That's the kind of person I want in our lives. The kind of person I want in my life. Even though I'm a disaster at normal human interaction. Especially because you're trying anyway." From the living room came a crash followed by Emma's voice. "It's okay. We meant to do that." They turned to find the fort had expanded to consume most of the available space. Blankets draped between furniture that cost more than cars. Pillows forming walls that definitely hadn't been designed for this purpose. Noah and Emma crouched in the center of their creation, flashlights in hand, completely unconcerned about the expensive chaos they'd created. "Should we stop them?" Victoria asked. "Probably." "Are we going to?" "Absolutely not." They joined the children in the fort, Victoria ruining her suit crawling across marble floors, Caleb laughing as a blanket collapsed on his head. The 4 of them sat in the dim warmth of their creation, trading stories and planning impossible defenses against imaginary dragons. Later, after Emma and Noah had fallen asleep in the fort they'd defended so valiantly, Victoria and Caleb sat on the couch with wine and comfortable silence. "What happens next?" Victoria asked. "With us? With the kids? With all of it?" "We figure it out, one imperfect day at a time." Caleb set down his glass. "I'm not going to pretend this is simple. You're a billionaire CEO with a company to run. I'm a single dad who consults part-time and makes spaghetti for a living. We're from completely different worlds. But our kids are best friends, and we're becoming friends. And maybe, if we're brave enough, we could become more than that." He looked at her directly. "I'm not interested in your money, or your empire, or whatever image you present to the world. I'm interested in the woman who cried when her son slid down a pole, who cuts onions badly and builds forts in a penthouse, who's brave enough to tell investors she's choosing life over legacy. That woman is terrified she's going to screw this up. Join the club. I'm terrified Emma's going to get hurt when this doesn't work out. Terrified I'm going to fall for someone whose life is too big to fit me in it. Terrified of wanting something I might lose. So what do? We'd be terrified together." Caleb took her hand. "We let our kids be friends. We keep having dinners and building forts. We see what this becomes without trying to force it into shapes that don't fit." Victoria nodded, feeling something settle in her chest. Not certainty, but something better. "Okay." "Okay?" "Okay." She smiled. "Fair warning, though, I'm probably going to be terrible at this. At dating and relationships and all the things normal people do without crisis management teams. Good thing I'm not looking for perfect, just present." They sat together as the city glowed beyond the windows. 2 people who'd built their lives around different kinds of survival, discovering they wanted to build something new. Their children slept in a fort that defied architectural logic. The empire Victoria had spent 12 years building was probably fracturing in ways she'd deal with tomorrow. The future was uncertain in every measurable way, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Victoria felt completely, terrifyingly, perfectly alive. 3 months later, the changes at Hale Industries were still controversial, but undeniably effective. Employee retention was up. Productivity had increased. The company culture was shifting slowly towards something more sustainable. Some investors had sold their shares. Others had doubled down. Whitmore had faded into irrelevance, his predictions of Victoria's downfall looking increasingly foolish. Victoria had learned to leave the office at reasonable hours, had learned that empires don't collapse when you stop treating them like life support, had learned that being a CEO and being a mother weren't mutually exclusive when you stop trying to do both perfectly. Noah had learned to slide down poles and build forts and ask for help when he needed it. He and Emma were inseparable. Playdates had evolved into regular dinners, sleepovers, and shared adventures that neither child would have imagined 3 months ago. And Victoria and Caleb had learned that building a relationship was like building a fort, requiring patience and presence and willingness to let it be imperfect. They'd navigated the media attention, the speculation, the challenges of merging lives that had been designed for independence. They'd had fights about boundaries and expectations, and the impossible mathematics of scheduling. They'd made mistakes and apologized and tried again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. On a Saturday afternoon in early winter, they gathered in Riverside Park, the 4 of them plus the fort building supplies they'd brought for what Emma insisted was advanced dragon defense training. The playground was full of families enjoying the last warm day before winter settled in for real. Noah and Emma were already racing toward the climbing structure, their friendship having evolved into something effortless and essential. Victoria and Caleb followed more slowly, carrying blankets and supplies, and the comfortable ease of people who'd chosen each other deliberately. "Think we can actually build a functioning fort in a public park?" Victoria asked. "Victoria, with your project management skills and my medical precision?" "Absolutely." Caleb grinned. "It'll probably violate several park ordinances, but that's what makes it fun." They built the fort together, the 4 of them constructing something that was structurally questionable but undeniably joyful. Other children asked to join. Parents smiled and contributed extra blankets. What started as a project for 4 became a community effort, the kind of spontaneous cooperation that happened when people stopped protecting their territories and started building together. Victoria watched it all from inside the fort, Noah teaching other kids the proper twirling technique for pasta, Emma directing fort expansion with the authority of a seasoned general, Caleb patiently reinforcing walls that kept collapsing. Her phone was in her pocket on silent. The empire was still standing. The world was still turning. But for these hours, none of that mattered more than this. "You're smiling," Caleb observed, settling beside her in the fort's central command. "I'm happy." The words came out simple and true. "I didn't know I was allowed to be this happy." "Of course you're allowed. Happiness isn't something you have to earn. I spent 12 years thinking it was. Thinking if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved enough, then maybe I'd deserve to feel this way. And now? Now I understand that working for happiness means choosing it every single day." Victoria looked at their children playing in the fort they'd built together. Means choosing presence over productivity. Means choosing people over empires. Means being brave enough to want things I can't control. Caleb kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "For the record, I choose this too. Every imperfect, terrifying, wonderful day of it." The fort stood for hours, accumulating children and parents and stories that would be told at dinner tables across the city. Eventually it collapsed under its own ambitious architecture, blankets and pillows scattering across the playground in glorious chaos. Emma and Noah laughed so hard they couldn't breathe. Other children joined in. Parents helped gather supplies while their kids planned tomorrow's fort with undefeatable designs. As the sun set and families began drifting home, Victoria and Caleb packed up their supplies while Noah and Emma negotiated details of their next adventure. "Same time next week?" Emma asked Noah. "Definitely. And maybe we can try the 3-story design?" Papa says 3 stories requires engineering consultation. Mama says engineering consultation is just another way of saying we need more pillows. The children ran ahead toward where Caleb's car and Victoria's driver waited, already deep in discussion about optimal pillow-to-blanket ratios. Victoria and Caleb followed slowly, their hands linked, the comfortable silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For what?" "For teaching me about forts and pasta and presents, for showing me what I was missing, for being patient while I figured out how to want this." "Thank you for being brave enough to try." Caleb squeezed her hand. "For choosing life over legacy, for letting me and Emma into your world even though it was terrifying." "It's still terrifying." "Good. That means it matters." They reached the cars where Noah and Emma were saying elaborate goodbyes that somehow included a secret handshake they'd invented and plans for at least 17 more playdates. "See you Wednesday?" Emma asked, hugging Noah fiercely. "See you Wednesday," Noah confirmed. Victoria and Caleb exchanged looks over their children's heads. The kind of glance that held entire conversations about carpools and schedules and the beautiful complexity of lives that had become deliberately entwined. The drive home was full of Noah's chatter about fort designs and dragon strategies, and how Emma was teaching him to be brave about trying new things. Victoria listened to her son talk with the kind of animated joy she'd once thought was impossible for him, feeling grateful for every choice that had led them here. That night, after Noah was asleep in his bed, surrounded by fort planning sketches, Victoria stood at the windows of her penthouse looking out at the city that had once seemed like territory to conquer. The same buildings, the same lights, the same miles of ambition compressed into vertical space. But everything looked different now. Her phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "Emma wants to know if Noah wants to help make cookies tomorrow. Fair warning, our kitchen is tiny and the results will be questionable." Victoria smiled and typed back, "Noah would love that, so would I. Even though it will probably be a disaster, especially because it will probably be a disaster. That's what I love about you. You've learned to appreciate chaos." Victoria stared at the word love on the screen, casual in context but weighted with everything they'd been carefully building toward. She typed back, "I've learned to appreciate what matters. Turns out chaos is part of that. The best part, the terrifying part." Same thing. Victoria looked out at the city one more time, then turned away from the windows. The empire was still there, still hers, still demanding attention and strategy, and the kind of focus she'd once given it exclusively. But it wasn't everything anymore. It was just one part of a life that had expanded to include forts and cookies and a man who taught her son to twirl pasta properly. It was just one part of a life she'd finally learned to live instead of just survive. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.